Have you ever watched a penguin documentary? Not the heartwarming ones about family and survival, but the darker footage they rarely show. The lone penguin that suddenly stops walking with the colony. It turns, faces the opposite direction, and begins marching toward the mountains, toward certain death, toward nothing. The researchers can't stop it. They can only watch as it walks away from everything it has ever known. And here's what haunts you about that footage. You recognize something in that penguin. Not madness, not confusion, but a kind of clarity that the rest of the colony will never understand, because you felt it too, haven't you? That inexplicable pull to walk away. Not from one thing, but from everything. From your job, your relationships, your entire identity. From the version of yourself that everyone expects you to be. The world calls this a breakdown, a crisis, a failure to cope. They use words like depression, burnout, existential collapse. They treat it like something broken that needs fixing. But what if it's not a breakdown at all? What if it's the most honest thing you've ever done? What if, like that penguin, you're not running away from life, but toward a truth so uncomfortable that staying would mean dying slowly, while everyone around you calls it living? Think back to when you were a child, not the memories you share at dinner parties, but the quiet ones, the moments you felt the disconnect. You're sitting at the table and everyone is laughing about something, but you can't remember how to laugh without thinking about it first. You watch your family like an anthropologist studying a foreign tribe. Their concerns feel distant, their certainties feel hollow. You learned early that there was something different about the way you processed the world. While other children played without question, you stood at the edge of the playground asking invisible questions. Why do we play this game? Why do we pretend this matters? What are we really doing here? Developmental psychology tells us that most children accept their reality as inherent truth. But some children, the ones who later walk away, they never fully integrate. They remain perpetual observers, watching life happen rather than believing in it. Their attachment to the world stays loose, conditional, easily severed. Your parents might have worried. Teachers might have called you withdrawn. But you weren't depressed. You were simply seeing through the performance earlier than you were supposed to. And just like that penguin that breaks formation, something in your wiring made you question the march itself. Not because you wanted to be difficult, but because the colony's direction never felt like your own. Now you're an adult, and the performance has become exhausting. You've learned all the scripts. You know how to smile at parties, nod during meetings, express enthusiasm about promotions, and milestones that feel increasingly hollow. You've built what society calls a life, but inside, you're that penguin, already turned around, already facing the mountains. You notice it in strange moments. Someone is talking about their 5-year plan, and you feel nothing. Not judgment, not superiority, just a vast and quiet emptiness where motivation should be. You watch people chase things, career advancement, social status, romantic validation, and you can't remember why these things are supposed to matter. It's not that you think they shouldn't matter. You simply can't locate the part of yourself that cares. Psychologists might diagnose this as anhedonia, the inability to feel pleasure. But that's not quite right. You can still feel. You just can't feel the things you're supposed to feel. The gap between what moves you and what moves everyone else grows wider each year. You start cancelling plans, not because you're tired, but because the effort of pretending to be present has become unbearable. You stop explaining yourself because no explanation will ever satisfy someone who hasn't felt this. They'll call it depression, which you'll know it's something else, something closer to clarity than illness, something closer to waking up than giving up. In Antarctic documentaries, researchers study this phenomenon. The solitary penguins march toward death. They've proposed theories, brain parasites, disorientation, illness. But some researchers quietly acknowledge a darker possibility. Maybe the penguin simply opts out. Maybe in its small brain, something calculates that the struggle of colony life, the noise, the competition, the relentless survival, exceeds the value of continuing. Neuroscience gives us a framework for this in humans. Your prefrontal cortex, the part that finds meaning and motivation, can become dysregulated. When you've experienced enough disappointment, enough existential friction, your brain's reward pathways literally rewire. What once sparked dopamine, achievement, connection, praise, now triggers nothing. or worse, triggers the recognition of emptiness beneath it all. Philosophers called this the void, Nietzsche called it staring into the abyss, existentialists call it confronting the absurd, but psychology has a simpler term, demoralization, not in the colloquial sense of being discouraged, but in the literal sense, the removal of morale, the collapse of the internal narrative that once made life coherent. You're not walking away because you're weak, you're walking away because you've seen too clearly. The penguin doesn't march toward the mountains because it's confused. It marches because something in it has processed information the colony hasn't. And that information, once seen, cannot be unseen. Or the terrible gift of awareness is that it makes unconscious participation impossible. There's a loneliness to this that cuts deeper than ordinary isolation. You can be surrounded by people and feel like you're watching them through aquarium glass. They're moving, speaking, living, but you're in a different medium entirely. Sound reaches you distorted. Their emotions seem real to them, but to you they feel like theater. You miss the version of yourself that could care about ordinary things. You grieve the person who got excited about weekends, who made plans with genuine enthusiasm, who believed in progress. That person is gone, and what's left is someone who understands too much and feels too little about what they're supposed to feel everything about. The emotional toll isn't sadness exactly. It's more like a permanent state of bereavement for a life you can no longer inhabit. People tell you to find your purpose or reconnect with your passion, but purpose and passion require a fundamental belief in meaning, and that's precisely what you've lost. You wonder if you're broken. You watch nature documentaries about that penguin and feel a kinship so profound it frightens you, because you understand. You understand the impulse to turn away from the noise and march toward the silence, even if the silence means nothing, especially if the silence means nothing, because nothing feels more honest than something built on illusions you can no longer maintain. The colony keeps marching, you keep watching, and the distance between you grows, but here's what the documentaries don't show you. Sometimes that penguin doesn't die in the mountains. Sometimes it stops, sits in the snow, and in that profound stillness something shifts. Not a return to the colony, but a different kind of survival, one built on acceptance rather than belonging. Healing from this state doesn't mean forcing yourself back into the march. It means learning to exist in the space between participation and withdrawal. You start small, not by finding grand meaning, but by noticing tiny, honest moments. The weight of morning coffee in your hands, the specific texture of silence at 3 a.m., the way light changes on a wall. Existential psychology calls this radical acceptance. Not accepting that life has meaning, but accepting that meaning doesn't have to be universal to be real. And the penguin in the mountains doesn't need the colony's purpose to justify its existence. It simply exists. And in that existence, there's a kind of terrible, beautiful freedom. You stop trying to reconnect with your old self. Instead, you build a new relationship with emptiness. You learn that the void isn't something to fill or fix. It's something to sit with, to breathe into, to allow. The people who've never felt this won't understand, but somewhere, another penguin is turning away from its colony. Another mind is walking toward the mountains, and in that parallel journey, there's a strange, silent solidarity. Years from now, you'll see that footage again. The lone penguin marching away from everything. And this time you won't see tragedy, you'll see courage. Because walking away from the colony when every instinct screams for belonging, that's not surrender. That's the most radical act of self-preservation there is. The colony will never understand why you left. They'll create narratives to make sense of it. Stories about your weakness, your damage, your inability to cope. Let them. Their understanding was never required for your survival. You know something they don't. You know that there are fates worse than isolation, like spending your entire life pretending to be alive while dying inside, like marching with the colony toward a destination that was never yours. The penguin in the mountains doesn't need rescue, it needs witnessing. And you walking away from everything, you don't need fixing, you need permission. Permission to stop performing, and permission to admit that the life everyone else wants for you feels like a costume you can no longer wear. Permission to face your own mountains, whatever they may be. So when the world calls you lost, remember the penguin. Remember that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is turn around, not because you've given up on life, but because you've given up on the lie. And in that turning, in that impossible walk toward uncertainty, you finally, quietly, terrifyingly become free. You're not walking away from everything. You're walking toward yourself.